What is going on, everybody? It's me, Severin7, and today I'm here to talk to you about the top 10 Aetherdrift cards I am most excited for, either because I think they're going to be the most fun to brew around, or because I think they're going to have the biggest impact in Standard. I almost didn't know where to begin making this list because I'm just really excited about this set, and there's so many interesting cards and mechanics that I'm really excited about the whole set. But these are the 10 cards that I am most excited about. So I was going to ask you to take a quick moment to pause the video and go into the comments section and see if you can either predict my entire top 10, or even if you can just guess a few cards that are in my top 10 to see if you have the same ideas that I do. With that, let's go ahead and get right into that list. All right, first up on the list, we have Voyage Home. This is such a cool card, and this is only one in a whole slew of cards that I think are going to be really interesting and give rise to an entire new archetype of deck. I think that either a blue-white or an Esper artifact control list is going to be completely viable after this set, because we get some really sweet cards. This is not the only affinity for artifacts card that fits well. There's also a black vehicle that has affinity for artifacts that destroys creatures, and then it leaves behind a vehicle body, which is pretty awesome. But this is insane. It's not hard in a control deck right now, especially with all the cards from previous sets like Brothers War and things like that, to have 5 artifacts on the battlefield by turn 3 or 4. And just with map tokens and clues, or using any of the tome that you can draw cards with. There's all kinds of stuff that you can use. You can use artifact-based removal, artifact-based board wipes even. And so being able to pay 2 mana to draw 3 cards and gain 3 life is insane. And this is only an uncommon, so this is not even going to be out of reach for a lot of people. It's going to be very free to play friendly. There's several other cards in the set that just make this absolutely awesome. And I really think Esper is where it's going to be at, because there are a few black cards that do similar things. There's a 5 mana spell that makes 2 Thopters, and then your opponent loses life and you gain life equal to the number of artifacts you control. And I think that's also going to be a good finisher and a good win con for a deck like that. So I'm really excited to see if we can get an Artifacts Matter control list out of this set. And I think we can, because some of these affinity for artifacts cards are awesome. Next up, we have Curse Cloth Wrappings. I'm probably pretty sure that most of you might not have thought that this was going to be on my list, or that maybe you've even really paid attention to this card, but I think people are sleeping on this one. I think this is an interesting one, because this really gives me Whip of Erebos feels. And for any of you who played during original Theros Standard, you'll know that Whip of Erebos was a very good card. This is not as powerful as Whip of Erebos, but in my opinion, it's pretty close, because it gives our zombies +1/+1. So if you're playing zombies already, that's pretty awesome, because you can, get value out of this the turn it comes into play. Because the biggest problem with artifacts like this or enchantments is, what do they do when they come into play? Do you play 4 mana and get no value out of it? Because if you do, then it doesn't matter how good the effect is if you can't get some value out of it the turn that you tap out for it. And this is giving you value. So if you're already playing some zombies, which I think is reasonable, I think it's not a bad idea to play this in a semi-zombie tribal list, just with some valuable zombie creatures. You get +1/+1 to your zombies, so it pumps up your creatures a little bit. And then being able to tap it to basically just cast stuff out of your graveyard every turn is pretty awesome. Now, you only get to do it once, because Embalm exiles it from your graveyard, but Embalm basically lets you cast it from your graveyard. The only drawback to that, in my opinion, is that cards that care about mana cost, the Embalm token does not have a mana cost. So anything that destroys like small mana cost creatures can destroy those tokens as well. So it doesn't work quite the same way as a copy token of a creature would. But I think this is a really awesome card. I think there's a lot of potential for it. I think being able to buy back things, even if you're not playing zombies, being able to buy stuff back from your graveyard every turn means even if you start running out of gas in your hand, as long as there's stuff in your yard to play, you always have something. And I think this is a really cool card. And it definitely, like I said, it gives me Whip of Erebos vibes. And Whip of Erebos was just a card that people used to grind out their opponents back in the day. So I love this card. I'm really excited for it. I hope you are too. Let's get on to the next one. Next up, we have Howl Squad Heavy. I am so excited about this because I think that this is the card we needed for goblins to be actually viable. Goblins are so close to being good. And in my opinion, they are. They're probably tier 2.5, tier 3 at worst, you know, which is not great. But the big problem is that we got Krinko in Foundations, the good Krinko that everybody uses in, you know, Explorer goblins and Timeless goblins and all the other different goblins decks in the older formats. And what makes Krinko so good is that in those formats you have goblins that give your goblins haste, which means you can tap Krinko right away and make a whole bunch of goblin tokens right away. People have gotten around that though by using Cauldron to put counters on goblins and, you know, somehow getting him into the graveyard and giving goblins on the field that effect. But that's much more convoluted, it's much more difficult, and being able to just go turn 1 goblin, turn 2 goblin, turn 3 this guy, turn 4 Krinko is a real dangerous curve. And the fact that this also makes its own goblins kind of gives it some Goblin Rabblemaster feels, although he does not have haste himself. But making a goblin every turn is pretty sweet. And then if you have max speed, you can pay a lot of mana into something like, I don't know, like an X spell that burns the opponent, or just cast a big creature that, you know, maybe you have like on the top end, like a 5 or 6 drop that you play in the deck to be a finisher. I'm not sure that the adding mana part is super important. I mean, it could just be good for dumping a whole bunch of goblins onto the battlefield. So, I mean, you play this, and then you can play Krinko, and then the following turn you tap Krinko and make a whole bunch more goblins. Then you tap this guy and make like 15 mana, play a whole bunch of goblin lords out of your hand, or draw a bunch of cards, or something of that sort. But I know that this is definitely the kind of card goblins has been missing, and giving other goblins haste is so much better than it sounds. And I really am excited about this. I think that goblins will be one of the first decks that I try out with this, and I hope that you guys will have fun with it too, because I love typal decks. I think that typal decks are a big part of what makes Magic fun and exciting. I really loved Bloomburrow for that, and I loved Foundations for it for a similar reason, because Foundations added a lot of typal support as well. So this makes me excited, and I hope it makes you excited too. We'll get on to the next one. Holadin Triumph Caster. Now this card really gets my creative juices flowing. Wow, this is a 2-drop for a vehicle mount deck. Like, if this survives a turn, there are so many aggressively costed mounts or vehicles that are aggressively costed because you have to do something else to take advantage of them. So for instance, like a mount might have a really good saddle ability, but the saddle cost is like 4. And then, you know, it only costs 3 mana to play it though. And so now you're like, okay, well, that card now has haste and it becomes saddled. That's insane. Like, this is so good. There are vehicles that have very cheap costs and high crew costs, and this crews it right away. It literally says mounts and vehicles you control have haste, so they can attack the turn they come in, and whenever a mount you control enters, it becomes saddled. Whenever a vehicle you control enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. That is so much value tacked on to a reasonable body. Like, it's a 2 mana 2/3, so it's not even like it's a 2 mana 2/1 or something. Yes, it dies to Lightning Strike. Yes, it dies to Brotherhood's End. But if this lives a turn, it's insane. Like, the amount... I don't have enough examples off the top of my head, and forgive me for not being more prepared. But maybe I can slap some examples somewhere on the screen here for you of awesome vehicles or mounts to use with this. I imagine it probably goes in a Naya shell, but there are definitely enough vehicles in red and white, and enough mounts as well in red and white to take advantage of this. This is a really solid 2-drop. It's just very good. The fact, if it only gave them haste, that would probably be good enough on its own, because all the mounts are already creatures, so they can attack anyway. Just even giving the mounts haste is pretty sweet. And then saddling them, and oh my goodness. this is a card I think will make a new deck. Like, if it doesn't, then I sad. I will be sad, because this is a cool card. This is one of the coolest pilot mount vehicle. Well, I mean, I guess mounts are new, but going back to original Aetherdrift, you know, vehicles were cool, but they weren't like, whoa, crazy. You know, there was a few good ones, but this is going to make even some mediocre vehicles really solid. So excited to see what happens with this card. Let's get on to the next one. And we have Monument of Endurance. I'm sure a lot of you probably guessed this might be on my list. This is an insane artifact, and this will probably go in my artifact control list as well. It's a 3-mana artifact that says whenever you discard a card, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Draw a card, create a treasure, or each opponent loses 3 life. So it is a win con, potentially, over time, which is why I think it will go well in a artifact control type list. What's crazy about this is that there are so many cards that give us huge benefits for being able to discard a card. You know, and there's a lot of cycling in this set too, which means that we draw 2 cards for discarding the card, and we get the effect of the cycle because it's not just regular cycling. A lot of the cards in this set say cycle this card, do X thing, you know, like destroy an artifact or enchantment, or, you know, bounce something or whatever. So now you play this and then you cycle something and get an effect out of it. You draw a card, then you draw a card again, or you ramp by creating a treasure token. Or if you're in the late game and you're trying to drain your opponent's life away, you can just keep cycling through your hand and discarding cards and drawing and discarding. There are what is it? There's a Collector's Vault is a perfect example. Collector's Vault is a 2-mana artifact that says draw a card, discard a card, make a treasure token. So now we get to draw a card, discard a card, draw a card, make a treasure token. And then, you know, if it's the second time we've done something like that this turn, we can make another treasure token. It's just crazy. Like, this card has so much potential. I think this card will see play in older formats potentially. I'm not 100% sure about the older formats thing, but I mean, this is a very abusable effect. And wow, like, what a cool way to take advantage of cycling effects and just, you know, looting effects and things like that, and just taking the drawback of any draw discard effects completely off the table for 3 mana. Like, yeah, this is definitely one of those cards where it's a 3 mana do nothing, but I don't know, the amount of value this can generate after you play it, I think wholeheartedly makes up for 3 mana do nothing, because you can ramp the following turn, you can draw extra cards. The sky is the limit with this thing. I think this is a fantastic card. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it will see play in a lot of different kinds of decks, not just control. I think there will be mid-range decks that take combo decks that take advantage of this, all kinds of stuff, because it ramps you. I don't know. I don't have enough good things to say about this card. This was a superb 3-mana artifact, in my opinion. On to Oil Deep Gearhulk. This is probably my second favorite Gearhulk. I do have another Gearhulk on this list. We'll see if you can guess which one that is before I get to it. But this is a very solid one, and this is another reason that it's another card. Like, you'll notice, I'm a little biased. I'm picking a lot of cards that feel really good in my artifact control list idea, but this is good outside of that. So I didn't just pick this because I'm really excited about artifact control. This is just a solid 4-drop. It's a 4/4 lifelink with ward 1, and it lets us snatch our opponent's best card out of their hand. And then, yeah, they get to draw a card, but the hope is that that card will be worse than whatever we took, you know, whether it's a removal spell or a keyboard wipe that they really needed to catch up. This is going to be good in mid-range lists. It's going to be good in control lists. It's going to be good maybe even at the top end of an aggro list. To make sure that we're snatching board wipes out of our opponent's hand. It's just a really good creature. It really is. It's very, very solid. The information we get from looking at our opponent's hand, on top of it being a very difficult to deal with body, is just awesome. So definitely think this card is going to see a ton of play. I think it'll see play in a wide variety of different kinds of Dimir decks. I personally, like I said, I like it in an artifact control shell as a potential win con. being able to play it and then, you know, continue to control the board and just keep smashing face with this and gaining life. And the fact that we can copy it with all kinds of things, like copying this with 3 steps ahead is super fun. You know, like in the late game, you can play this and then protect it, and then on a following turn when you have enough mana, you can counter something and make a copy of this, so you're nullifying a spell and snatching their best thing out of their hand. And it's also important to note that you can target yourself with this too. So let's say you've just got like a handful of lands and you just desperately need an answer and you can't find one, you keep drawing lands, you can play this and discard a land and draw a card. So important to note, you can target yourself with this. So it can potentially save you from having a handful of stuff that doesn't work, or get a card in your, maybe you're got a card in your hand that's just completely dead in the matchup and you can just target yourself and discard it and draw something more relevant, and then it still leaves behind a solid body. So this card's awesome, and it's probably the best Gear Hulk, but it's only my second favorite, so we'll get to my favorite in a few minutes. We have Radiant Lotus next. I don't know whether or not this is gonna be crazy in standard. I think it could be. I see like Doppelgang or just other there are a few really good X spells in standard that do crazy things. Doppelgang is the first one that comes to mind, but there are a few others, and the potential for this card is just insane. It costs 6 mana, but you can tap it and sacrifice artifacts right away, and I could easily see this in a deck that just makes a lot of map tokens and uses like World Wake Helm to double up on tokens and just controls the board and makes a ton of maps and clues and treasures and things like that, and keeps the opponent just sitting around trying to keep up with whatever you're doing. And then you slam this down, sacrifice a whole bunch of maps and treasures and whatever artifacts you have laying around on the battlefield, make a ton of mana. It's really good. You can only make 1 colored mana with it, but you just make sure that you save 1 mana somewhere from a treasure or something else to add that second color for Doppelgang. But I want to say there's a red card that you can just burn your opponent's face with. I can't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure there is. And then there's a bunch of other, you know, Finale of Devastation, which lets you just draw a whole bunch of cards and then you have no maximum hand size. You can do that. I just think this is a really cool card. This card will make every X spell printed moving forward for the next 3 years way more viable than it probably would be otherwise. Because yeah, you have to build around this, but if you succeed in building around this and you can successfully play this and sacrifice enough artifacts, being able to cast X spells, like imagine Torment of Hailfire with this, you know, and you just make like 10 artifacts and then sack 10 artifacts for 30 mana and you Torment of Hailfire for 28. Like, that's ridiculous. So just, this is a super cool card. It gives a lot of hope to me for X spells in the future. I mean, you could technically even play this in a deck that plays Goldvein Hydra, and you know, where you play some gold veins and opponent kills it, you get a bunch of treasures, and then you play this and sacrifice all the treasures and make a Goldvein Hydra that's triple the size of the one that died. Like, that's a fun way to win too. So yeah, this card's really cool. I'm excited to see if it makes its own waves in standard, but I know it'll probably make waves in older formats. All right, we have Repurposing Bay. 2 and a blue for an artifact that says to pay 2 mana and tap it to sacrifice another artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. This card is something I'm excited about. This is going to be such a fun, like, toolbox artifact card, and it's definitely going to make like a synthesizer list more viable, because this basically is 4 additional synthesizers, because you can, you know, just sacrifice 2 mana artifacts to go find synthesizers. So you just make sure you play at least a handful of 2 mana artifacts to sacrifice to this. And the fact that you can play this and abuse ETBs and other things that just do crazy stuff, you can just kind of ramp up the list. You know, you got the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. You can, you know, so you can sacrifice a 4 mana artifact and go get Might Stone, Weak Stone, and either draw 2 cards and then, or -5 something, and then it adds mana, and then you can, you know, use that mana next turn to sacrifice it and go get Chameel or some other crazy 6 mana artifact, and just keep working your way up the list all the way up to something crazy like Portal to Phyrexia. So this is just a really fun card. It's basically Birthing Pod for artifacts. Now, Birthing Pod cost 1 more mana, but one of those mana was Phyrexia mana, so you could still cast it for 3, but you had to pay 2 life for it. And then the activation cost was also 1 and a green Phyrexian mana, so it's basically the same artifact, but without any life paying. And that does mean that the activation cost costs 1 more technically, because you can't pay 2 life to make the activation cost 1. But I think that this is just as good in my opinion. And there are a ton of good artifacts in Standard right now to just toolbox around and either blow things up or, you know, get crazy ETBs out of it, draw cards, make mana. Gear Hulks. Like, you can just sacrifice Gear Hulks and go get bigger Gear Hulks. Like, all kinds of fun stuff. This is such an interesting and fun card, and I guarantee you some crazy deck will come out of this, and I know I will definitely be trying to be one of the people coming up with a crazy deck for this, so keep your eyes out for that. All right, on to my favorite Gear Hulk from the set, Riptide Gear Hulk, 5 mana Azorius Gear Hulk. It is a 2/5 with double strike and prowess, and when this creature enters, for each opponent, put up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls into its owner's library, third from the top. This is basically the -3 from Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That is a very strong ability to tack on to a body like this. A 2/5 prowess double strike is really good. Like, that's a very good blocker. It's gonna get bigger, you know, for any non-creature spells you play, which means it's a threat. Like, it's a big threat for your opponent to deal with. And I just really like that at least 2 of the Gear Hulks in the set solve a problem and leave a body behind. The other Gear Hulks in the set are a little more proactive. They either, you know, you got the Selesnya one that searches for auras and artifacts that are 1 mana, and you've got the Rakdos one that gets something back from your graveyard, and the Gruul one that pumps your entire team and gives it like trample or whatever. Those are more proactive Gear Hulks. But what I like about this Gear Hulk and Oil Deep Gear Hulk is that when you play it, it solves a problem and then still leaves something for your opponent to have to solve themselves. So in this case, it's getting rid of a problematic permanent on the battlefield and removing it for at least a few turns, because it's putting it third from the top, which means that they can't get it back out of their graveyard. It's not going back to their hand where they can just cast it next turn. It's solving the issue for at least 2 turns. And that is really, really strong. As we saw, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria was an absolutely brutal planeswalker in Standard for the entirety of his time in Standard, and he still sees play in older formats. And that -3 is a big reason for it. Of course, his other abilities are super strong, but the fact that he could protect himself in such a meaningful way was a big reason he was so strong. And this is no different, because this leaves behind a solid body on top of it. So yeah, this is a really good Gear Hulk. And then not to mention copying and blinking this, don't even get me started. Like, this is such a strong card in my opinion. It's abusable. It's fun. It's very well designed in my opinion, and I just am really excited to put this in some Azorius decks. So keep your eyes on this one. This one might get expensive in paper. So, and last but not least, we have the Speed Demon. If there's anything that makes Start Your Engines a viable mechanic and makes people care about playing cards in their deck that say Start Your Engines, it's this card. This card is nuts, and this card doesn't even care whether you're max speed or not. It just cares about you having speed, which you gain at least 1 speed when this enters. So it's a 5 mana 5/5 demon, which is already flying trample demon, which is already good enough. You know, it's not insane, but a 5 mana 5/5 flying trample demon is good. Like, it's solid. And at the beginning of your end step, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is your speed. So if you play this and you have max speed, I'm just if they don't kill it right away, oh, you're just going to draw 5 mana, 5/5 flying trample, draw 4 cards, lose 4 life. That's insane. That is really, really good. And don't even get me started on the fact that this is a perfect follow-up to Shieldred. Shieldred is going to start seeing play again because of a card like this. And again, in the Demons deck, you've got the Room, which is 3 mana. So you pay 3 mana, you play the Room, you play 4 mana, play Shieldred, start drawing and gaining life, gaining more life than nullifying the life loss from the enchantment, and then play this to follow it up. And all of a sudden, you're actually gaining life from drawing the cards, just like you would from Phyrexian Arena or any other, draw a card, lose a life effects, because you're losing 1 life per card you draw. So Shieldred says gain 2 life per card you draw. So now all of a sudden you're netting life and drawing cards. This card is nuts. It is such a good card, and it is going to demand an answer right away. And that is what makes cards good. That's why Shieldred made it to like $100 when it, was at its peak pricing in Standard, because it was one of those cards where if you didn't answer it, the turn it came into play, it just ran away with the game. And now we have a card that supports that and makes Shieldred even stronger, because now on top of that, we're already gaining life from the cards we draw. Now we're going to draw a whole bunch of cards at the end of our turn and gain a whole bunch of life, which means we're going to have a whole bunch of answers. And that by then, even if they do remove this, we probably drew another one. So I think mono black mid-range or Golgari mid-range or Dimir mid-range or whatever version of mid-range you want to play that is playing the Demon Room and Shieldreds and things like that is going to be very difficult to deal with, because it's getting to a point where we have a critical mass of creatures that just have to be answered right away. You've already got things like Unstoppable Slasher and the combos with that. And just there's so many solid, really difficult to deal with black creatures in Standard right now. So I mean, mono black's already been really dominant. So is Dimir. Golgari a little less so, but still very strong. There's just a lot of stuff in Standard right now, and black has become a very powerful color in the format, alongside mono red, at least for best of 1. But I mean, even in best of 3, even in big tournaments, you're seeing these Gruul aggro lists and these Dimir and mono black mid-range lists do well. And this is just going to add to it. And this isn't even the only good card we got for that kind of strategy. So very strong card. I don't know if it was a mistake, but I think that this card is going to be a big player in Standard moving forward. And I think that it's going to be really, really good. So with that, I hope that you found this list entertaining. I'm curious to know how in line your list was with mine. So I'd love it if you leave in the comments what your opinions on my list are. And, maybe if you stopped at the beginning to predict what I had on my list, let me know how that went for you. So I hope if you enjoy things like this and you are excited to see the things that I'm going to be brewing coming up in the next week after the release of the set, that you'll hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. We are super close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would absolutely be thrilled to get to that goal, which would get me at least halfway closer to being able to participate in the preview event for each set, as I think it's around 2,000 where I might have a chance at that. So I'd appreciate that very much, and I appreciate all of you who have spent this time with me and gone over these cards with me. I hope you're as excited about this set as I am, and I will catch you in the next one.